So let me officially welcome everyone to tonight's Zoom session targeted at Thunderbolt's event this coming Friday and Saturday. Topic, as I just said, is passing and traffic management. Then we'll talk about Thunderbolt turn by turn. So I'm going to jump right in, but let me reinforce that if you have any questions or comments, and in particular, if anything I'm saying isn't clear to you, please jump in, because I've driven on track more times than I care to mention, but many of you haven't. So some of the things I may mention may not make sense. And if you don't tell me that, I won't know that. So please, please help me out with that part. So with that said, that didn't work the way I wanted. Let me do that again. Let me get to the right PowerPoint. Here we go. Okay, and we have people jumping in at the last minute. So, as I said before, tonight's topic is passing and traffic management. We have the normal disclaimer that says, if you try something I talk about tonight and it doesn't work out, it's your fault, not mine or the club's. So, so we always have to put that disclaimer in there, because what we are doing on track, we, as many of you know, call safe, serious fun. And a big part of that is what we do with traffic and passing. And in particular, safety is really the number one priority here. And it really is highly influenced by the driver attitudes. And if you take it too seriously or with the wrong way, it'll reduce the fun factor, which is not what we want to do. Now, some of you may have noticed the track pack always emphasizes courtesy in driving on track. And that applies to drivers taking a pass or being passed. But at the end of the day, excuse me, passing is really all about communication and cooperation. We give signals and take passes so that both drivers know precisely and exactly what to expect and when to expect it. This is not racing, and that's a big difference between what we do in racing. Is both drivers know exactly what's going to happen. Now, how do we make sure that that happens? Well, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I will emphasize here and again later that the car taking the pass, if is 51-49 in this equation or more. So the car taking a pass has the ultimate responsibility to make sure it's a safe pass. In particular, if you're given a pass signal and you don't think it's a safe time or place or conditions to pass, wave it off. Don't take the pass. So we'll talk more about that. Now, the basics that most people, if not everyone on this call, has seen and heard before. We only pass with a signal. And by the way, that's from the driver. If an instructor gives a signal wrong, it has to be from the driver. One very clear signal for each car that is going to be passed. If you're giving a signal, you drive your line, you drive the proper line. You do not move over or out of the way to be polite. That's a dangerous situation. That's because we want to be predictable, and the overtaking car always goes offline, which means, especially in the shorter passing zones, which we'll talk about at Thunderbolt, if you're taking a pass, you're going to enter the following corner offline. You should enter the following corner offline. To do otherwise, you would have to chop off, jump right in front of the car you just passed. That's not a polite thing to do or a safe thing to do. And of course, we want to give a lift if that's needed. And as you get more experience, you'll learn how to give pass signals sooner, which makes life a lot simpler for everybody. So with that said, How do we get comfortable on track? Those of you who are new to DE or new to your run group, you can figure out where the passing zones are as you study the track with track maps and videos and such. But if you're a new driver on track in the green run group, the first day your instructor is going to help you. The instructor is going to commandeer the right side mirror and is going to help you monitor the traffic behind and indicate when you should give a pass signal. As the event goes along, you need to take over that responsibility, even if you're a new driver on track, at least on the main passing areas. If you're in yellow or certainly in blue, you need to be able to give and take pass signals kind of in all the passing zones, where your instructor may help you with that as a double check, but I've seen cases where students use the instructor as a crutch, and that's not what we want to have happen, because passing and traffic is as big a part of driving as learning the line on the track. So let's just do a quick poll of who's in which group at Thunderbolt this coming Friday, Saturday. So you should just now see the poll up, and just there's 2 questions here. So indicate which run group you're assigned to, and how many DEs you've done before before Thunderbolt. So just take a minute and fill that in so that I have some idea, and everyone else on the call has some idea, how much experience everyone has, that we're dealing with. So I'll give you 5 more seconds. There's still 3 people who haven't voted. So good. We've almost got everyone in. Good. So here's who's on the call tonight. 4 people in the green run group, 5 people in the yellow run group, 1 in blue, and 1 person who's not attending the event, and 1 person in red. So we have a ringer in the group in red, but that's okay. These sessions are open to everybody. So with that said, the results should disappear. If they don't disappear, you can X them out. So what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes is traffic management. When do we look in the mirrors? How do we check the mirrors? How do we give pass signals? Where to give pass signals, and when to give pass signals? Sounds pretty simple, right? But it starts with mirrors, right? Especially for the traffic behind. We really have to know what's going on behind the car and beside the car if we're going to manage traffic. In particular, we never want to be surprised by a car that's behind us. So many of you have heard me say this before, but the mirrors, the side mirrors, need to be adjusted properly. And there's a proper way to do that. The center mirror, your rearview mirror, you probably have that adjusted correctly to see behind the car, straight behind, and as far behind as possible. But most people do not have the side mirrors adjusted correctly. The left mirror, here's how you adjust it. And by the way, tonight's slides are on the website, or you can send me an email and I'll send them to you. But you lean your head against the driver's side mirror, and then you push the driver's side mirror out until you can just barely see the back corner of your car. And when you put your head back straight up like you would normally be driving, you won't see anything in that mirror. And you do the same thing on the right side, so that you lean your head under the rearview mirror, push that mirror all the way out until you can barely see the right rear fender. When you do that, instead of blind spots like you see in this diagram here, which is the typical way most mirrors are side mirrors are adjusted, you now have little or no blind spot beside the car. Now, this is really important on the track. It's just as important on the street. So I strongly encourage everybody to adjust every vehicle you own have the mirrors adjusted this way. I've done this with dozens, if not hundreds of people. It's a revelation if you're driving on the highway and on the track to know that a car will be in your side mirror if they're close until they're literally abreast of your shoulder. So assuming you've adjusted it correctly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. This is in the slides, but your instructor will work with you on this as well, but really important on the track. So when do we look in the mirrors? So let's do a second poll here, and let me find the second poll. Why is it not showing up? Okay, that's not what I want. Let me end that. Come on. Zoom's not cooperating here. All right, what happened to my other poll? All right, well, I guess for some reason, okay. Operator error, okay. So when do we want to look in the mirrors? So this is a multiple choice. So when do we want to look in the mirrors when we're on the track? There are some obvious answers here, maybe some that aren't quite so obvious. So take a few seconds and click as many as you think make sense. Based on your experience or based on what you think. Because obviously we're trying to know who's behind us and who's approaching us, behind the car. So give 5 more seconds to get everybody in here. We got almost everybody. All right, so so answers. Beginning of the passing zone, obviously, that's the obvious answer and clearly should be a place to look. The middle of a passing zone, absolutely, very important, because modern Porsches and other cars can close very quickly. And if you're not looking in the middle of a passing zone, you'll get surprised by a car being behind. End of a passing zone. Actually, the answer there is yes. We'll talk about that. Entering a corner, not really. In a corner, not really. Exiting a corner, yes. So let's talk about that just briefly, a little bit more. So when do we want to look in the mirrors? Entering a passing zone's obvious. As soon as the car is straight, before that if you can, because if there's a car behind you, you want to know it so you can give a signal as soon as you can in the passing zone. That one everybody got, right? How about the end of a passing zone? That's one that a lot of people don't get, but it's really very useful, especially as you gain some experience, because if just before or just as you're getting on the brakes, if you glance in the rearview mirror and you make a mental note of how many cars are back there, and in particular, how close they are and how fast they're closing, now you have some intelligence for the next time you get to a passing zone. And this is a place a lot of people don't naturally look in their mirrors because they're focused on the upcoming corner. But it really makes sense to look in the mirrors at the end of a passing zone. The middle of a longer passing zone, the front straight at Thunderbolt's a great example. Cars are going fast. You need to look in the rearview mirror several times going down the longer passing zones like the front straight. And you want to look in the mirrors during a pass. Those side mirrors, if they're adjusted the way I just discussed, you can see if a car is passing you, whether it's the right side or left side, you'll know exactly where they are. And hopefully they're going past you quickly and getting out of your way, but you want to know that. If they're not getting past so quick, you want to be aware of exactly what's happening. In a corner, no need to look in the mirrors. That's a distraction. Once we've glanced in the mirror, entering the braking zone, and know who's back there, sure, if you're good enough to glance in the mirror and see if somebody's gained on you in a corner or a complex, great. But don't feel obligated, because guess what? You can't do anything. There could be 10 cars behind you in a corner and you can't do anything with it. So there's no worry, no need to deal with that mentally at that point. So how do we check those mirrors? How do we, mechanically do this? Well, we want frequent, quick glances at that rearview mirror. And if there's a car there, we want to give another glance. The side mirrors are only when there's a car close, actually during a pass. That second glance, when you look in the mirror, that confirms the details. Is there one car? Are there multiple cars? Yeah, if there's 3 cars, what colors are they? And how far back are they? And from my previous glance or the one before that, are they closing slowly or quickly? We're not going to get fixated on the mirror. These are glances, but this has to become a habit. And if you're a brand new green student, don't worry about this too much. But if you've been to the track a few times, like many of you have, this ought to by now be a habit. If it's not, it's one to really work on. Now, it's a little hard to see in this picture, but you can, if you look at the rearview mirror in my car here, you can see that you can see my eyes, right? You can see my sunglasses. I've glanced at the rearview mirror. This is the front straight at VIR, long passing zone, fast cars, close quickly here. So if I had the video version of this, which I didn't take the time to put up, you would see I glance every few seconds in the mirror during this long passing zone. That has to be a habit. So how do we give passing signals? Well, as early as possible, make sure it can be seen. If you have, contrasting colored gloves to the color of your car, that's a big help, because a lot of people, give hand signals that are actually fairly hard to see. And get your arm all the way out so that people can see it. I mean, the basics, I think everybody knows, but one signal per car. Oops, too much here. Let me try this again. If there's 2 cars, then pull your arm in before you give a signal for a second car or a third car. And if it's a lower horsepower car, a lift. And as we're just talking about the mirrors, monitor what's going on. If there's a car alongside of you and you're going about the same speed, you're beginning to approach a corner, give a brief lift so that you don't end up side by side, in the braking zone. And of course, we don't want to hold up a faster car this behind us. Not that anybody would ever do that, of course. So here's an example of a mediocre left-hand side pass signal. It should be done with a finger, out to the left side. I can't really do that very well with Zoom, but this driver put his arm all the way out, but just kind of put his hand out. And okay, this is from a video, at VIR. So, I took the pass. I knew he wanted me to pass on the left, but it could have certainly been clear. Notice we have a silver car and a blue, driver's suit and black gloves. Not much contrast at all. Imagine if those gloves were red, right? Imagine how much more obvious that pass signal would be. This is, an example, in my opinion, of how not to do it. This one's harder to see, but this is a right-hand signal. The driver is sort of pointing over the roof, so reasonably okay. But again, a black and white car with black driver's gloves that would be better off if, again, if they were red or yellow or some other contrasting color. But there you see, the basic idea: left hand pass signal straight, arm straight out the window all the way to the left. Right hand signal, reach over the roof and point to the right. So where do we give passing signals? Well, we're going to talk about passing zones on the next slide. And as we said before, if we enter a pass zone with a car right behind, we want to give a signal. But just as importantly, and as you get more experience, this will become more second nature. You know, in the middle of a passing zone, if you're in the middle of the front straight at Thunderbolt and there's a car coming quickly behind, you want to get your arm out the window quickly so that the car can go by. And when that happens, you don't have to slow down. They don't have to slow down. On the other hand, you can get surprised in a passing zone. A car closes quickly and you didn't realize they were there. And then you look in the mirror and all of a sudden a car you didn't even realize existed materialized in your rearview mirror. Well, if you're in a passing zone and not close to the end of it, you need to give that driver a pass. Unfortunately, that driver had to slow down, because you didn't get your hand out quickly enough. On the other hand, if it's late in the passing zone, approaching the brake markers, it's probably too late to give the passing zone. So this is where judgment and experience really makes a difference. So speaking of passing zones, we'll talk more about this when we do turn by turn in a moment, but most of the passing, 90% of the passing or more at Thunderbolt is on the right side. So you're going to be giving right side signals, just like this over the roof of your car. And so the front straight between 2 and 3, between 3 and 4, between 6 and 7, all of those are on the right side. Between 5 and 6, a lot of people prefer to do it on the right. An initial pass signal could be on the left, but your instructor will work with you on those, and we'll spend a little more time on that. So when do we give a passing signal? Well, some of this is repetitious, but I'm going to emphasize it again. A car shows up that wasn't there before. And even if you can outrun that car, if they're behind you coming onto the straight and you put your foot down and they can't keep up, but they were behind you coming onto the straight, you should have given them a signal. In fact, especially if you can outrun them on the straight. If they caught you, in the corners, they're quicker. And if you let them go, even if that means you have to lift for a second, you'll never see them again. They won't hold you up. And that's true even of a lower horsepower car. And, if you're driving a 400 or 500 horsepower car and I'm behind you in my 200 horsepower car, I guarantee if you let me by, you're never going to see me again. And that may be true of some of the other drivers in your group. You need to let those cars by. And in fact, you may learn something by watching them, through the next series of corners. Now, sometimes there can be, 2 or 3 or 4 cars stacked up. And that's when judgment and experience comes into play as to when to give a passing signal. Say you've been behind 2 cars, for 3 corners and waiting for a pass, and now another car gets behind you. Well, you may choose to send that car around, to kind of break up the train of cars, or you may choose to wait. And there's no black and white answer there. As I sort of indicated before, the ideal pass, anticipates cars approaching before and during a passing zone and gives the pass signal early, and both cars drive as if there no pass had actually happened. Here's a short example. This is a long straight at VIR, the back straight, for those of you that know VIR. My car has 200 horsepower. Some of these cars have a lot more. So this is exiting Oak Tree. My foot's on the floor for this sequence. I haven't lifted. 2 or 3 cars go by me, and they didn't have to slow down, and I didn't have to slow down. Actually, 4 cars go by you, right? So that's the way it's supposed to work. All those cars went by. There was no issue. Nobody held anybody up. Nobody had to lift, all that kind of thing, right? So to summarize, passing is really important from a safety and fun perspective. It's really all about communication and cooperation. It helps sometimes to think in terms of etiquette, because after all, that could be your friend in the other car, right? Or somebody that will be your friend. If you use the mirrors, know the passing zones, think about some of the things we've talked about tonight, you'll have a safe time on the track, and you'll have fun. So with that, let me stop there and ask for questions and comments. I know I went quickly. I did that on purpose, but please jump in with questions or comments at this point. Just unmute yourself to do that, because I think most people have their microphones muted at the moment, but just unmute yourself and jump in. While I take a breath and a drink of water. Piece of cake, right? Right.
Bill?
Yeah.
What kind of elevation changes are there? Anything like Lime Rock?
At Thunderbolt? No, not as much as Lime Rock, but there are elevation changes, and we'll talk about that in a minute on the turn by turn, but not as much as Lime Rock. No, both of the New Jersey Motorsports tracks were built in a pretty flat area, so the elevation was that they had to deal with was fairly limited. But we will talk about that in a minute. But good question. And if I don't emphasize that as we talk about the track, I certainly will.
Hey, Bill, did you comment about waving off a pass?
John, I did it too quickly. So yes. So I mentioned it early on that if you get a pass signal and you don't think it's safe at that time or place to pass, you should wave it off. And what does that mean? It happens that I can show you an answer to that. So I think, can you see the wave off here?
Yeah, we can see that. Okay,
good. So here's the, what it looks like to wave off a pass. Notice I'm straight behind the car. The car in front gave me a pass signal. But right before the braking zone for the bus stop at Watkins Glen. In fact, you can see brake markers behind my glove. So way too late to take a pass. And so I did not move alongside the car. I stayed behind the car, and I waved my hand crossways like this so that the driver can see it in his or her mirror. And that's how one waves off a pass. That way that both drivers know exactly what to expect. As I said before, it's all about communication. This is part of that communication. John, thank you for that question, because I meant to emphasize that before. And I will mention that the slides that are on the website, or you can send me an email to get them, there's a whole bunch of extra credit stuff after the ones I went through after the end. This is in that set, along with a bunch of other stuff having to do with passing and traffic and so on. Those of you that feel extra motivated, or who were A students and want to get the extra credit. So other questions, comments? Well, I'm finding well, if not, we'll talk about Thunderbolt turn by turn. So who on the call tonight's never driven Thunderbolt? Okay, Mike, you haven't? I can't tell your first name because I just see an abbreviation there, but I see two people at least. So anybody whose video I can't see that has never driven Thunderbolt? Okay. Jody hasn't? Okay, great. So at least 3 of you haven't driven Thunderbolt. So, and I know most people on the call tonight are in green or yellow groups. So, so great. So I'm going to talk about the track. Let me say it this way, to give you the basic orientation of what to expect. But the main thing you're going to work on, especially those of you who are new with your instructor, is to learn the line and to get to a point where you can drive the line reasonably consistently. And as good as videos and even simulators and everything else are these days, there's no substitute for driving. So with that caveat and the normal disclaimer, for everyone on this call, I highly encourage you to print out several track maps from the website because these maps are designed to take notes on. So when you come in from a run and you want to remember, where did I turn in, or how did that corner feel when I did it right, or how soon could I get on the gas? Could be anything like that. What was I looking at? Write it on the track map in the vicinity of the corner or the section of the track where that happened. And if you get in the habit of doing that and develop and keeping these notes, you'll be amazed at how much they help you learn during the day and help you when you come back to Thunderbolt the next time. So some of you have heard me like a broken record on this topic before, but it's a very important skill that helps most people. And you can use this with your instructor. If you're having trouble at a particular corner, ask your instructor to use the track map and help explain that corner while you're in the paddock, so that next time you go out on the track, you have some of that in the back of your head. We talked about passing zones already. The only point I want to make here that I didn't make before is that, notice the section here on the track between 7 and 9, what's called turn 8. That's a curve, as you can see, it's a corner. Depending on what the chief instructors decide at Thunderbolt, they may make that a passing zone for all groups. And if they do, it'll be a passing zone on the right. So it'll be another right side passing zone. It's not straight, it's a curve, but it actually isn't hard, particularly to pass in that area. So, but that'll be discussed in the drivers' meeting if they decide to do that. But otherwise, all the passing zones here are straightaways. And the other thing to notice is that this section of the track here, from 9 through 11 is not a passing area. It's a pretty long, twisty part of the track we're going to talk about. There's no passing through there. So just be aware of that. So here we go. Turn 1, pretty classic, almost 90-degree right-hand turn. It's uphill. I forget who asked me about elevation, but this does go uphill. So as we turn in and approach the apex, the track starts to go uphill, which helps the car turn a bit and gives us plenty of grip. So the only hard part of this corner, if you will, is that, it is reasonably quick, and you may feel like, well, I can get in here earlier than we really want to. We want to apex the curb in the middle of the curbing, not before that. And if we do that, it's a fun corner, but we're approaching this on the front straight. And so we're approaching this in 4th or 5th gear. This is a 3rd gear corner. And now if you're a new student or new to Thunderbolt, you may choose to drive the whole track in 4th gear or even 3rd gear, and that's perfectly fine. But my point is you're going to be doing heavy braking entering this corner. So the challenge here is get on the brakes in plenty of time, slow the car down in a straight line, turn the car in, and and then we can pick up some throttle as we approach the apex and begin to accelerate up the hill. The curb at track out here, oh, and I should point out, I apologize, I have these cryptic abbreviations on the slides. There's a TI for turn in, the turn in point. There's an A for apex, and there's a TO for track out. Those are the three basic points that determine the curve or the line, if you will, in any given corner. So just the one thing to be aware of here, the track out curb is, you shouldn't be driving on it in the student groups. I find in some cars, there's a little bit of a groove between the asphalt and the curbing, which can actually grab the wheels a little bit and can surprise the driver, because all of a sudden it feels like the track's driving the car and you're not driving the car. But this corner, most drivers can figure out, pretty quickly, and it's a fun corner to drive because we've slowed down, we're getting back on the gas, we're going up the hill. Now, as we exit the corner here, let me move this a little bit. There's going to be you're going to see a flagger at the top of the hill on your left, just off this picture that's on the slide. That flagger is going to tell us whether it's safe to proceed like normal to turn 2, because turn 2, we're coming uphill. There's a crest just somewhat before the apex of turn 2. So turn 2 is blind. We're going to turn in and not really be able to see most of the corner. And so there's a lot going on here. That's why looking at that flagger on the left as we're coming up the hill out of turn 1 is really, really important. Because if there is something going on, that flagger is going to tell us about it. If there isn't, then we can proceed like normal. And then the other thing that's happening here is cars entering the track are entering the track, along the right side here. Now, we're going to be track left exiting turn 2. They're going to be entering track right, but it's still a busy place. And some drivers, get caught out by, or surprised by, I should say, the fact that they can't see most of this corner until you get into it. It's one of probably the only really blind corner at Thunderbolt. If any of you other than Bob were at pit race, 10 days ago when we were there, half or more of the corners at that track were blind. So you're well conditioned for turn 2 if you were at pit race. But anyway, that's turn 2. Relatively quick corner once we figure it out. But the fact that it's blind, requires a certain amount of mental memory of where we need the car to go. Now, the back part of Thunderbolt has several nice, fast, fun corners, starting with turn 3. This is actually quite a fast corner. You can see it's pretty shallow. In other words, not a very sharp corner. In most cars, you're gonna be on the brakes, gently to slow the car down in a straight line. You're going to turn the car roughly at the turn in, and then you're going to pick up some gas and squeeze the gas pedal as you go through the corner. There are cautions here. And these cautions apply to every corner on the track, but they especially apply to the fast corners. If we get into this corner too early or too fast, there's an easy solution. We simply drive the car off in the grass at track left in this case. What we don't want to do is try to hold the car onto the track, because if we're in too early or too fast and we try to hold the car in, bad things are going to happen. So just, I'll repeat this a few times, but as we go around the track, but this is the first place I'll emphasize, because this is a fast corner, but it requires being precise with the turn in and the apex so that we get the line nailed down. Now, drivers in advanced groups may use the apex curbing in this track. And by that, I mean the curb here where the apex is. You can see the red line has covered up the red and white curbing, but there's a long set of curb here in the middle of turn 3. I do not recommend that those of you in green and yellow, or maybe even in blue, but certainly green and yellow, do not recommend that you use that curb, because as you go faster in the advanced groups, the inside of the car is less loaded. The car is less impacted by driving over that curb. But at the speeds you'll be driving, that curb can actually upset the car, and it's not worth it, from a learning perspective, to try to use that curb, or frankly any other curb that I'm going to talk about tonight. So be aware of the curbs there. If you do brush it, it's not going to be a big deal. It shouldn't be, but if you do hit it too much or at the wrong angle, it can really upset the car. And I'm going to repeat questions, comments as we go around here. Please jump in. Turn 4, another fast corner, although not quite as fast as turn 3. And we're approaching this one even faster. So this corner does require some brake, not a huge amount, but some braking, because it is slower than turn 3, and we're approaching it faster than we did turn 3. Advanced drivers will definitely use the curb here, even if they don't use it in 3, to straighten this section out. But again, I recommend that you not do that, because again, it can push, your car in a direction that you don't want to. Now, turn 5 is the exception to the rule of fast corners on the back part of the track, right? Turns 3, 4, 6, even 7, pretty quick corners. 5 is a much slower corner. You can see it's 90 degrees plus left-hand corner. And most drivers make the mistake of trying to overdrive, meaning trying to drive it too quickly. So this is, some of you have heard the term slow in, fast out. This is a slow in, fast out corner, because it is followed by a quick section of the track. Now, I want to make a point here about the connection between turns 4 and 5. They're pretty close physically. There's not a big distance between 4 and 5, and it turns out that if as you exit turn 4, if you don't try to force yourself to get all the way back track right, entering 5, it's just a lot easier. And there's no reason, the way turn 5 drives, to be all the way track right. So we tend, pretty much everybody tends to approach turn 5 from mid-track, or even some people from the left side of the track. But as in green and yellow, think about the middle of the track here. Don't worry about, because it's kind of you almost have to force the car to get all the way back to the right here, and it's kind of unnatural, where the car is perfectly happy being in the middle of the track and turning in for 5. It's the exception to the general rule that we want to be all the way track left or right, before a corner. So turn 6 coming up, another nice quick corner. A little bit sharper than 3, not as sharp as 4. And I'll emphasize here that like several corners at Thunderbolt and many tracks, the apex is not just a point. I've drawn on the slide here the apex as an arrow, like it's a specific point. But if you notice the red line, it follows this apex curbing for quite a distance. And think of that as a zone. We want to run along that curbing along the edge of it for 10 or 20 or maybe even 30 feet, to make this a nice, big, gentle arc. This corner, requires a little bit of brake, not a lot, a gentle brake, back on the gas to settle the car, and drive through the corner. Now we're approaching turn 7 coming up is not that unusual a corner, but everything that follows it is the signature part of Thunderbolt. It referred to as the octopus for reasons you can probably guess from this overhead view of the track. And so there's this whole sequence of connected corners which means it's starting at turn 9 all the way through to turn 11. We have to compromise what we would normally drive in order to deal with what follows. So if you're in green and yellow, don't worry too much about that. Your instructor is going to show you the line, but 7 is pretty straightforward, although it's slower than 6, and we do have to do some braking to come in, but still it's a fun corner, nice and quick, and it feeds into turn 8, which is actually, it's not a straightaway, but it's one big arc, and we don't treat it like a corner. We just drive it. And there's as many lines through turn 8 as there are cars and drivers, I suppose. But the idea is find an arc from the track out of turn 7 over to the vicinity of the turn in for turn 9, which by the way is not track left. It's somewhere between the middle of the track on the right side of the track here. Your instructor will work with you to find an arc through here that you're comfortable with, and it's great fun. The cars, it's relatively quick, and a lot of fun to get the car hustled through this nice big wide sweeping turn. What that sets us up for, though, is, whoops, went the wrong way. Sorry about that. But I guess is the whole octopus. So here's turn 9. So we're approaching turn 9 from that nice sweeping arc, but notice how sharp turn 9 is. If you look at the whole, dimension of this corner, it is well and truly a lot more than 90 degrees. It's a pretty sharp corner, made worse by the fact that the way we have to exit it to set up 10 compromises the exit. And if anything, it's off camber. So the track up to this point has had favorable camber, nice corners, nice quick corners. Now it's set us up to suck us in. We've been comfortable. We've been going through corners. The car's felt good. It's felt glued. We're going quick. Now, guess what? Slow corners, unfavorable camber, all the reverse of everything we've just put up with. So we've just experienced, which we liked. So, we have to adjust our head coming into this section. So this is a very slow, long corner. Lots of trail braking. What do I mean by trail braking? You can use the brakes, at 30%, 40%, 50% as you slow down coming at the end of turn 8. And that's going to do two things. It's going to slow you down for turn 9. It's going to help the car turn. Look how far the car has to turn for turn 9. We have to have the steering wheel turn to the right, what seems like forever. And by the way, as you start turn 9, turn your head to the right, at least 90 degrees. You should see your instructor's helmet in your peripheral vision, probably, if you're looking correctly. Got to get the eyes all the way around the corner here. So, and we have to be patient. Slow corner, and we're going to follow the curbing all the way around. And the reason that it's compromised is, notice that the line exiting from turn 9, we have to hug this curbing all the way so that we can kind of go diagonally across the track to the beginning of turn 10 over here. If we had exited turn 9 over track left, which is what we would like to do to make it faster, now we'd be in worse shape coming into 10. So and 10 is this whole 180-degree plus corner. And the line here is pretty simple. The line is follow the curbing. Follow the curbing all the way around. And this, and I should point out that elevation, from 9 down to 10 is downhill, which is not helpful. And the track is off, and the track is angled or cambered, if you will, banked in the wrong direction. So the track, this whole section of the track here is off camber, meaning the car feels like it doesn't want to do anything. It's not happy. Well, it's a slow corner. We follow the curbing around, and requires patience. For those of you who've done skid pads or autocross, this is a great this is a big skid pad. Oops, I went the wrong way. It's a big skid pad. You can, you can give the car a touch of throttle, and the car will probably run wide, or you can back off the gas a little bit, and the nose will tuck in. So it's actually a good place it's one of the very few places on a track that we drive where you can actually experience, that kind of reaction to a car on track at a safe speed, because this is a slow corner. So,
hey Bill, just got a question about that.
Sure.
So if it rains over the weekend, do we need to be extra cautious about this particular turn, or like could we kind of treat it like a skid pad, kind of like what you were saying?
That's a great question, Angelo. Yes, you can. This corner you can treat like a skid pad, because this is slow enough and safe enough that if you were to spin the car or something, nothing bad's going to happen. There's all kinds of runoff, and you're not going that fast. If it's wet, it's the fast corners to treat with ultimate respect, because if it's wet and you go off, in a fast corner, not so good, right? And when it's wet, the grass is wet. So when you hit the grass, the car doesn't slow down nearly as much as it would if the grass and dirt were dry. So that's a great question. And this actually would be a fun place to drive in the wet, because you could dance the car around here with the gas pedal without any trouble at all. I mean, I wouldn't mind having a student do that. I'd be comfortable with that. I would not be comfortable with a student doing anything like that in the faster corners. Okay. So 11 A and B, or 11 and 11A, depending on how you count the numbers, is this flat set of S's. But notice that we have to enter, we want to enter the beginning here from track left, which means that we have to exit, turn 10, all the way over here. Again, we would prefer to exit turn 10 on track right, but because of the way 11A is set up, we actually have to hold the left side of the track here longer than we would typically like. So we straighten this section out, and now we're setting up the front straight. So now we're beginning the fastest section of the track. And that's why it's so important to drive 10 correctly, because it sets this whole section that leads us onto the front. So here we have the S's in 11, and these are pretty straightforward. They lead to turn 12, which is a very fast late apex corner, but it's very easy to get this one wrong. All the comments I've made before about fast corners, apply here in spades. Advanced drivers are going to use the lower part of the curb here. For students, I would tell you to avoid the curb. If it's wet, stay as far away. Don't get near any curbs in the wet. In the wet, curbs have two problems. One, they tend to move the car if you bump the curb, because it's It's not usually level with the track. And number two, the curbs are painted red and white, right? Well, paint isn't very friendly with water. And so if the track's wet, you don't want to be near any curb, I don't care whether you're a student driver or, the most advanced driver on the track, because the curbs are going to be slippery. But even in the dry, I encourage those of you in green and yellow not to worry about the curb, just apex the corner, up against the curb, and you'll be fine. And the comments I made before, if you get in too fast or early on this, then just drive the car off into the grass. And when you do drive, if you do drive the car off into the grass, you slow down some more, then you count to 10, and then you think about getting back on track, looking for a flagger and so on. Because if you try to come back on the track too soon or too fast, bad things happen. So, and those of us who are chief instructors, when we talk to people who've had an off, we do not penalize anyone for deciding to drive off the track. That's always a good decision. A bad decision is trying to keep the car on the track, because that's when bad things happen. And this corner is fast and lots of fun, but again, requires precision, and it's easy to make a mistake here that you might not want. Now, I say all that. Most drivers in green and yellow, it's never an issue, but we talk about safe, serious fun because we emphasize safety first. So just a quick summary. We've talked about all these. We don't want to be early on any of the fast corners. We want to look at that flag station come up the hill, track left, at turn 2. We want to avoid the curbs, doubly so if it's wet. Turn 5 slow. Have patience in the octopus. Many of you have heard the Randy Pope's quote, "What's the fastest way through a slow corner?" Slow. And then treat turn 12 with lots of respect. And most important, when you're at Thunderbolt, have fun. We all come to the track to have fun. If we pay attention to the safety aspects and so on, then everybody's going to have fun and have a good time. So again, I went quickly, so let me pause and see if anyone has questions or comments before we wrap up. So I know if you haven't been there before, this may seem like a bit much, but if you if you're the kind of person who learns visually, and you want to print out some of the not only the track map, but some of the diagrams to take notes on, that can work as well. But I don't think any of us can learn a corner as well from anything other than driving it. So at the end of the day, what you're going to do with your instructor on track is going to be the key to learning the track. All right. So
just first off, this is great information. Thank you. Can we expect either track markers or cones to identify the turn in and track out points?
Oh, Paulo, thank you for that question. That's so basic, I forgot to mention at the beginning. There should be, and normally are, cones at all 3 of those reference points, at turn in, apex, and track out. And Thunderbolt's normally very good about having those in place, and our chief instructors check those before the session gets going. Now, 2 comments about that. First, the track out cones in particular often get hit by exuberant drivers. And so the track out cones may get knocked down. occasionally one of the others will get knocked down, but not nearly so often. And two, since cones can move, as you get more experience, you'll want to find reference points that aren't cones. But if you're in green or even yellow, those cones are there to help you learn the track. So yes, absolutely, they're there. Your instructor is going to, use those cones to, give you a reference point. And if you're a brand new driver on track, never been on track before, you're going to kind of drive almost point to point on your first couple of laps. You're going to turn in at the turn-in cone. You're going to look at the apex cone. You're going to look at the track out cone. Well, if you think about that, two straight lines, one between the turn-in and the apex and one between the apex and the track out, that's not really the arc that we want between around the corner. But so we want to get as soon as we can, we want to get our eyes up a little bit so that we kind of smooth that out and make that a smoother motion. But the general advice that we all give is, if I'm in the braking zone for turn one, and I'm about to finish my braking, I want to be looking at the apex cone. I want to be focusing on the apex cone and picking up the turn-in cone in my peripheral vision so that I can turn in at the right point. But my eyes are already ahead of where I'm going. And as I approach the apex cone, I want to be, looking at the track out cone or beyond it and picking up the apex cone with my peripheral vision, and so on around the track. So, so that at least the cone that's coming up nearest me should not be where I'm focused. I should be focused, one ahead of that and looking for that next one out of my peripheral vision. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So that's a great question and a perfect example of me, jumping way too far ahead for people who are new to DE. So thank you for asking that. Other questions? Comments? Okay. All right. Well, going once. I thought I heard somebody.
So Bill, we have access beginning tomorrow, 7 p.m. I believe that.
John, you're breaking up, so we're having trouble hearing you.
And are we going to be? And are we do we have tech as a potential for tomorrow, or is that refer back to the track?
I would,
I'll put in the chat.
Yeah, I as I understand John's question, it was, is there going to be tech at the track tomorrow night, Thursday night? I don't know the answer.
Bill, yeah, that is the plan. The plan is to do it from, I think the club can enter the track sometime from 7 on. So if we can get some cars done, it makes it easier in the next morning. So we'll probably be there from we get in a little early, so 7 till about 8. We'll get some cars, we can get them done. That's the plan.
Okay. Great. Bob, thanks for that. Yeah, that everybody should know that normally, if it's possible, the tech folks will, prefer to tech as many cars as they can the night before, because it just makes the morning of the event that much smoother. But it always depends on when the track decides to let people in, and that's very hard to predict. But hopefully that goes according to plan, and Bob and the tech team can get a bunch of cars teched tomorrow night. If you're planning on getting teched on Friday morning, my advice is always get there plenty early so you're not the last one in the tech line. It's a lot more comforting, as especially if you're new to this, to get through the tech line early and not be worried about a long tech line. Okay.
Bill,
Any other-
Bill,
Yes.
Mike here, Mike Sportsman's Arena. I didn't sign up for anything, but I just because business business I'm involved in. But if I came down on a Saturday, is it possible just to observe the track and everything?
Mike, yes, it is. A year ago, the answer would have been no because of the track's COVID rules. But as far as I know, as of now, you could, you could come down and observe. Absolutely.
Do I have to bring any identification or anything like that, or just show up?
No, you can just show up
Okay.
and introduce yourself. Excuse me, I just got a cramp. But been sitting too long. But no, you can just show up, and those of you coming, if you have friends or family that want to join you, they're always welcome in the paddock. Of course, you can't go on track, but you can certainly observe from the paddock and the other safe areas around.
Great, thanks very much.
Sure. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Great. Well, then we're going to wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in
Thank you,
there.
Bill. Thank you very much. It was very useful.
Oh, great. Thanks, Monica.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bill.
Good night, all.
Good night. Good night. See you.